welcome back to Freedom Matters. I'm your host, Mark McIntyre. My guest today is a first-generation Palestinian-American. She is the 8th daughter of devout Muslim parents. She's also a devout Christian wife and mother of her own new daughter, whose name is Nada. She is a rising star in the legal universe. She's fresh from litigation, successfully defending free speech against forced speech. We're going to get into that one, okay? So she's an absolutely ideal guest to be on this show, and she has perfectly framed herself on the Skype screen. So I want to welcome to the show Nada Higuera, Esquire.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to diving into some of the subject matter.
I love talking about law and cases with lawyers. Let's just dive right in. Let's just go right into it. What we'd like to do, since this is about defending the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, this is totally up your alley. I'd like you to just take a moment to discuss with our audience how you formulated your concept of freedom that is enshrined in the Constitution of the America. It's all yours.
Yeah, so to me, I always use my personal background, and that shapes what I believe and what I value. And so coming from a Muslim background and converting to Christianity, knowing that in many countries that's punishable by death, that to me, so the utmost important freedom that I hold dear and I don't take for granted is the freedom of religion that we have in this country, because I know firsthand what would happen to me, say if I were to go to Iran today, and freely confess that I was a Muslim who's been saved by the grace of God and is now a Christian. So really, I see that a lot of people take that for granted because that's what they know. They don't know anything else, and that's what they're used to. But even though I was born here, I know my parents believe in the Quran and Sharia law. So, thankfully, my parents didn't threaten me, but I know that they could have, that they could have threatened to kill me, and that it does happen even in the United States where Muslim parents kill their children if the children are shameful or are, convert to Christianity. So I take that very seriously, just the fact that I have that freedom, and that I can be even talking to you right now about this and not fear that it's going to be broadcasted.
That's an amazing opening statement. I've never heard such a powerful defense of the freedom of religion. And it's interesting to me, as with so many of our guests, is that once they have recognized early in their life the existence of a God, this becomes an important freedom for them to defend. I believe you've told another interviewer that you were 5 years old when you discovered God. Is that true?
Yeah, so my earliest memory of God, it wasn't that I ever discovered him. He was kind of always there, and I knew him.
Right.
But it was my earliest memory was just knowing that God was with me everywhere that I went, knowing that he loved me and that he wanted me to love others. And so, but what you were saying is people who find God, they want to protect that religion. But it's also an important right for those who don't want to practice and those who want to be free from religion. So although I'm a strong Christian, I want people to be able to freely have the right to not have any religion or to practice Buddhism or whatever they desire. And just to have that free exchange of ideas and opinions makes this country so great. I think we're losing a little bit of that, but ultimately our Constitution allows for that, and the law allows for that, and that is extremely important, especially like I compare to Middle Eastern countries because that's my frame of reference,
right.
Because that's my culture, that that's where I'm from, and a lot of my friends are Middle Eastern, from Iran, from Saudi Arabia even, so that's what I compare America to, and really it just shows how great of a country that we live in, and it's just such an honor that I can defend our Constitution because it's really next to the Bible, it's the most sacred text.
Yeah, it's a historical fact that the founders and the writers of our Constitution were refugees from countries that did not respect the freedom of religion.
Right.
And that was the backdrop of their writing. If you read the founding documents of our country, Madison, Jefferson, and Jay, just read those three, which I'm sure you have. What do they? And you read the very first opening sentence of the Declaration of Independence. You find the word creator. I know this drives people crazy who are atheists, but nevertheless, this is what the country was founded on.
Right.
I think it's interesting, however, in your case, Nada, it's interesting that I think you've told somebody else, I've watched a couple of your interviews, you've told somebody else that your parents, even though they're devout Muslims, they never pushed their religion on you. Is that true?
No, I know that they wanted me to be Muslim and they wanted me to practice, but it was never forced. They're extremely devout. My dad prays 5 times a day. He reads the Quran. They fast during Ramadan and very involved in the local mosque. And so in that way, I know that they wanted that for us. And they were extremely disappointed when I did tell them that I was a Christian. But it was never that I had to cover my head, for example, or I had to read the Quran, or I had to pray. It was more that they wanted that for me.
How old were you when you knew that you were a Christian? When you knew it?
Yes, I would say about 22.
Really?
I heard the gospel when I was 18. I always knew what my parents believed wasn't true.
Now, how did you know that? How did you know that?
I think it's hard to explain, but I think it was the Holy Spirit, and those who are Christian kind of understand that you have an intuition. And so I would see how I related to God when I was young, even going back to that 5-year-old memory. And I even in the bathroom, as sacrilegious as that sounds, like I would be able to talk to God, and he was always with me. And then I looked at my dad, and my dad would have to cleanse himself, do the washing before praying, and pray facing a certain direction and reciting certain words. And they really emphasize not eating pork and covering your arms and be just very religious. And I knew that God didn't care about that. I knew that.
Don't you find it interesting? Don't you find it interesting, Nada, that the Arabic cultures and the Jewish cultures have this history of legalism in their religion. When you were describing what your father would do for his daily ablutions, right? Very similar to what Jews practice. What is lost in a great deal of discussion about the problem of the Middle East is that both Arabs and Jews are both Semitic peoples.
Right.
So it's impossible for an Arab to be anti-Semitic, unless they're against themselves, of course.
That is a great observation, and it's completely true. And they have much more in common than otherwise.
Yes, yeah.
And they're also very devout. They really do, in that legalism, want to serve God. And it breaks my heart seeing my dad pray so often, and he reads the Quran daily for hours, seeking God. And his heart isn't to show off. He does it in the privacy of his house. His heart is really just to see God, and that's the God that he thinks is the real God. But it's just amazing to see that devotion. I can't even name many Christians that I see the same devotion that I see in my dad.
Yes, well, I'm sure we all have stories about that. It's a typical thing, I think, that children must go against their parents in some sense in order to free themselves and to become an independent person. And in your case, it's done very spectacularly. Well, it's redundant. It's done spectacularly, not very spectacular. That you were able to migrate from the Muslim background that you were born into to the solid, devout Christian background at the age of 21. That leads us into our next segment, and that is that how did you decide to go to law school? Tell me.
I originally went to college wanting to be a police officer, and I studied, my undergrad was in criminal justice. But then going through some of the classes and going on ride-alongs with police officers, I realized that wasn't the right career for me. It's so practical, because I would watch some social work videos and just cry and want to take the kids home myself. And I'm just too much of an empath to be able to separate my personal heart from the person in front of me. And I'm not physically the strongest person to, take on some of these bad guys.
No,
so it wasn't
agree.
until I had graduated college with my BA that I just thought, well, what do I do now? And because my parents, their highest education was middle school, and 5 of my sisters didn't even graduate high school. And so I didn't even know that the option to be a lawyer or go to grad school was possible. I just never thought about it. But it wasn't until one of my friends actually suggested that, hey, you should try going to law school, because she was doing that. And she said that I can help my family and I can help others, and not just be an advocate, but to have that authority to go into court and have the credentials to really stand up for what I believe in. And so I just took a leap of faith and took the admissions exam. And I got into a good law school, McGeorge School of Law in Sacramento, and I tried it out and I really loved it. And so it worked out, but it wasn't until it was suggested to me by a dear friend.
Well, I got to agree with you. I could never be a police officer, too. I'd be arrested the first day on the job. I can tell you that much. No, I would. I'd be arrested. I could never do that job. I could never exercise the restraint and the patience that police officers have to do in order to do their job.
It's a very demanding job.
I'm too opinionated. I'm way too opinionated to be a police officer.
I'm too sensitive to be a police officer.
So after you graduated with your JD from the McGeorge Law School from the University of Pacific, you actually started. Did you immediately go to the Advocate for Faith and Freedom law firm? Is that how it happened? And tell us why. First of all, why is a law firm named Advocate for Faith and Freedom? It's a wonderful name, but how did that happen? How did that happen?
So I graduated law school, and my law school is in Sacramento, and the law firm is in Southern California in Riverside County. And so I moved here after I got married, because my husband's family is from Marietta. And I had taken the bar exam, and there's 3-month period between when you find out if you passed and when you took the bar exam. And so I was in a state of limbo, and I didn't really know what type of law I wanted to go into. A lot of people would ask me, and a lot of other people who I graduated with knew exactly what they wanted. And I just knew that God had opened these doors, and I was good at it, and I was interested in it, but I didn't have a particular niche. And so I took the bar exam. I was just taking it step by step. And in that period of waiting, I wanted to start meeting some Christian lawyers. And so someone told me about this firm in Marietta, which is somewhat of a small town. And they said that the law firm has multiple lawyers. They're well known. They have a private practice for estate planning and business law. And then they also have a nonprofit for constitutional law. And I was really intrigued. I emailed the firm, and I wanted just to come in and meet some like-minded Christian attorneys, just to see what it's like to not be a typical money-hungry lawyer. That's never what I wanted to do, and I didn't get into it for money, even though that's a great perk. So the partner, Robert Tyler, said that he responded to my email and
Well, we had a little interruption in the signal from our guest, but we're resuming, and we were speaking to Nada Higuera, and we're talking about the fact that she joined this law firm, where has a very unique clientele and has a division between their profit and their non-profit litigation. And so if you could just pick up in terms of, I really want to get to the kind of law case that you recently succeeded in doing, because it's an extremely important area of defending free speech against what we call, as what you call, forced speech. So can you bring us up to speed on that one?
Yeah, so the nonprofit side, Advocates for Faith and Freedom, which really is that we want to defend faith and freedom. We took on a case where we were defending a pro-life pregnancy center. The state of California passed a law in 2015 that would go into effect in 2016 called the Reproductive Fact Act. And it required that pro-life pregnancy centers post a notice stating that women can get a free or low-cost abortion if they call this number, and actually required the pro-life pregnancy centers to post that phone number. So essentially it was a referral, and pro-life pregnancy centers exist to be the alternative to that. Mm-hmm. And so for them to have to point the way to the abortion clinic was forced speech. Mm-hmm. And so our client really said, he said, hey, I'd rather close down my clinic than to post this notice because it violates everything that I believe, and I'm not going to be forced to speak this message. Mm-hmm. And so I took it on as just the merits of the case, that we live in a free country and we should not be forced to advertise for the government, especially when it comes to a sensitive political and moral issue such as abortion. Because you're not just talking about a warning on a cigarette box or some of these other things that the government can force, these disclaimers. This was actually a political issue of abortion. Yeah. And it was taking a position for abortion to post this notice. And we took that up to the Superior Court in Riverside County. Mm-hmm. There were several other law firms who took the same case up on the federal level, but ours was the only case on the state level. And the reason we took it on the state level is because the California Constitution does not have as many exceptions and carve-outs as the First Amendment. So the First Amendment has been watered down a little bit on the federal level. With commercial speech, the government can regulate X, Y, and Z. But our California Constitution, believe it or not, is more protective than the federal Constitution. So we made the decision to take it to Superior Court. Mm-hmm. And all of the federal cases lost. They lost it in the Ninth Circuit. Really? And we actually won the case with a Riverside County Judge, Gloria Trask, saying that it was unconstitutional. So what that did is provided that the law would not be enforced in California. But the law firms that were taking the federal cases, those were all combined, and they went up to the United States Supreme Court after our case had been won, because they wanted this to be illegal across the nation. So that was the benefit on their side for going through the federal court system with the First Amendment. Right. And eventually ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, was successful in litigating that case in the Supreme Court a year after our case. And the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional as well. And we wrote a brief for the United States Supreme Court giving evidence that we found in our case and attaching the judge's opinion, and the court agreed with that. So, and they even cited our brief when they were giving oral arguments, and they asked questions about it. So right. It was just really great to be a part of that.
Let's go, a great rundown there. I can see how effective you must be in a court of law. That was a textbook. If I were a student in a law school and you just gave that rundown of that case, I go, wow, I want to be a good lawyer like her.
Thank you.
I
try not to use too much legalese.
No, I know. You didn't even use the word amicus when you talked about the brief. You didn't use the word amicus brief, amicus curiae. You didn't even use that. Yeah. I want to drill down a little bit into the case, though, because as you point out, strangely enough, the California law codes actually are more protective of speech, especially against forced speech. At least they didn't anticipate it. I'm sure that they'll dissolve that once they see this tape and they hear you. They'll change the law and they'll get very restrictive on it because it is California. But I'm interested in the fact that it shows your legal acumen and strategy that you decided to go to Superior Court, because had you lost, you could have always appealed it up the chain. Am I right or am I wrong? Whereas if you go to federal court immediately and you lose, you only got one shot. That's to the and they lost in the Ninth Circuit, Ninth Circuit. Okay, so they only had the one shot of going to SCOTUS, the Supreme Court. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and also through litigating it in Riverside County, we were able to actually treat it as just a lawsuit and do the discovery and fact find as to why this law was passed, who it applies to. We discovered it only applied to pro-life clinics, which showed that it was discriminatory. You didn't have any of the clinics that performed abortions. They didn't have to give any notice saying you can go, if you're a for-profit abortion clinic, you should put the notice up. You would think that you can go get a free or low-cost abortion if the government really is concerned about access, and some of these private practitioners that make people pay for an abortion. So being able to do that legwork and to treat it like an actual lawsuit, to take depositions, we gathered a lot of evidence. As opposed to the federal case, they immediately on their first motion for an injunction to prevent the law from being enforced, before they did any discovery, right away they asked for the injunction, and that's what was appealed. And so they didn't have that time to do discovery and to get into the trees as to what's going on here, and really like the background, which took a lot of hard work. But we did that, and it was useful to the Supreme Court, because that's when they cited our case, because they said we did the discovery, we discovered it only exclusively applied to pro-life Christian pregnancy centers, and that clearly showed the agenda behind what was going on.
Two questions for you, Nada. First question is the law in question, the California law in question, which now has been ruled unconstitutional by both the California Superior Court and also by the federal court, using much of the research and the findings that you did. Did it prescribe that abortion-only clinics must post a complimentary notification that if you don't want an abortion, here's a number you can call? Did the law say that?
Absolutely not.
No, this is a slam dunk.
And the legislator actually said that the reason for this law was to prevent some of these deceptive pregnancy centers who have an agenda against abortion. So even the legislative history and the purpose was clearly targeted.
For pro-life clinics and pro-life
agencies. Which they claimed is deceptive and manipulate women, forcing them to have their children.
So in the decision at the Superior Court level, your level that you litigated on, what was there a finding that this is simply unfair? I mean, despite the content of the law, to require one side of the argument to post and force you to speak in a certain manner, and you don't require the opposing point of view to also engage in forced speech. Did anybody point this out from the bench?
Yes. The judge herself was able to see right through it. And you would think in California, especially on a Superior Court level and a female judge, that they would just kind of be blinded. But we had a lot of people praying. My biggest prayer during the case was that the judge would be able to see and to have, just to see clearly what was going on. So thankfully, just exactly as you asked that question, she asked it. And she asked the Attorney General. She said, why is it like this? And it was such an honor to see, because I didn't expect much. And a lot of these cases, I know that we might lose. We fight them anyway and we take them to court, but I didn't expect much. But to have her be able to ask those questions and to see that she was getting it was thrilling for me, and it gave me so much hope.
Congratulations! I haven't read the decision by SCOTUS. Do you happen to know what the score was? Was it a 5-4 decision, or a?
I don't remember. I just remember that we won, but it was. I think it was 5-4. Yeah.
And did they take note of the unfairness of the requirement of forced speech? Did they take notice of that?
Not as much. They were more concerned that it wasn't commercial speech that was being regulated, because if it was commercial, it was more technical and legal. Our Riverside County judge was passionate and she saw right through it, but the SCOTUS was more just technical about it and didn't really pay attention to that discriminatory aspect of
Well,
it.
thankfully, we have judges, and many female judges, by the way, even some avowed feminist female judges who actually can read the law. I had a case where four faculty members, females, filed Title IX allegations against me just for words that I used. I didn't touch or do anything like that. Nothing physical, but just words in emails, right, and on Facebook, right. And what they did, the college hired a female judge who they thought would just roll over and put me in stocks and hang me, and people throw apples at me, but no.
Yeah.
He said no. He was obnoxious. That's Mark. He's intemperate and he's impertinent and he's often both at the same time. Yeah, but it was perfectly legal what he said.
Right. Yeah, and I consider myself a feminist, and actually the reason I loved representing this pregnancy center is because they give women options.
Yeah.
I'm all about choice and options, and this pregnancy center offered the option of parenting and adoption and really empowered women.
Yeah.
So I feel you there, and our judge was right on.
Isn't that great?
And it was great because I was 8 months pregnant when I was trying the case, and so just to be in the courtroom and it was clearly visible. My daughter was 10 pounds 5 ounces when she was born, so I had a very
Big
large
baby,
bump.
yeah, big baby.
Yeah, and the judge would even ask me, like, is it a girl or a boy, and when are you due? So it was just ironic that, the case was about pro-life, and I was pregnant, and the judge was, asking those questions. It was great.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did you actually, are you attracted, in terms of your professional acumen as a lawyer, are you attracted to the pro-life abortion issue? Is that where you're going to plant your flag? Is that why your legacy as a lawyer is going to be written in stone in legislative decision?
Yeah, I am passionate about the First Amendment as a whole. So whether it's this case happened to be free speech and freedom of religion, and the overarching matter was pro-life, but to be honest, going back to your first question, I would love my legacy to be that I preserve the right of people to speak freely and openly and to exercise their religion, and to be free from that government harassment that I know is possible. I mean, people think, that would never happen in America. We will be censored, or where your right to practice your religion will be infringed upon. But I've seen it. And we had another case where a pastor was reading the Bible outside the DMV in Hemet, a small town in Riverside County, and a CHP officer came up, took the Bible out of his hand, closed it, and put him under arrest. And to me, I love the pro-life case, but the why I loved it so much was because of the speech and the religious aspect of it. Right. And same thing with that Bible case is, that's what they do in the Middle East, and we're not in the Middle East, and over my dead body will I allow us to ever get there, because I want my daughter to be able to freely proclaim her religion and to be able to freely practice without that fear. I'm so blessed that it is a foreign concept to many of the viewers that you wouldn't have freedom of religion, but and I want to keep it that way. I want my daughter to never I'll teach her through what I know, but I want her to never have to experience that.
Well, let me tell you something. You've got 2 shots at Supreme Court justiceship. One is you, of course. I see you as a candidate. But if not you, then Nyla. I think Nyla is going to be a Supreme Court justice.
God willing, that would be awesome. She's a feisty one. She already argues with me. She's only 2. She wanted my phone the other day, and I didn't want to give it to her. She said, sharing, Mama. And I was like, okay.
She's only 2 years old?
She was using it against me.
She's only 2 years old?
Yeah.
It reminds me of the time when I broke out of my playpen when I was 2 years old and threw the wooden slats at my mother's feet when she was washing clothes, and she looked down at me and she says, "Oh, this one's gonna be trouble."
Oh yeah, and look at you now. You're still trouble. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Now I want to drill back into the law here and get your view. A lot of people are very familiar with the so-called bakery case. I think it was Oregon or Washington or someplace up there with it.
Colorado.
Oh, Colorado. Okay, a little bit to the side there, right? And also there's a.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Are you the Masterpiece case?
Yes, the Masterpiece case. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it was. Yeah, it was Colorado.
Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And also there's a florist. Now, in these cases, these were commercial operations open to the public, fulfilling requirements for purchase. In one case, it was cakes. The other case, it was flowers. And as people have followed these two cases, both of the states, they were in different states. One was Colorado, I think the other one was Oregon. Both of the states had laws forbidding you to deny service to homosexuals or transsexuals or anybody who was confused about their sexuality in any category. And this was prohibited under the so-called Protection of Minority Act. And these cases got all the way to the Supreme Court, bouncing back and forth as they do, sometimes taking years for people to get justice. And finally, the Supreme Court ruled that forced speech or compliance with speaking out is unconstitutional. Could you drill down into comparing the let's take the McMaster's Bakery case and then your case that you won. What's the difference between the forced speech and the, I don't know what you would call it, speech?
Yeah, I think they're very similar. There's more similarities than differences. In the Masterpiece Cake Shop, you had someone who was passionate about their art and practiced their religion.
Yeah.
And so by having them being forced to make something which violates their religion and their conscience, I mean, that's where there's a problem. It wasn't like, they just had all these cakes made to order and they didn't want to sell it to someone because they didn't agree with them. That's not the case. It was they're being commissioned specifically to create an art piece for a celebration that they don't believe in based on their biblical values. Mm-hmm. And so it's very similar in our case where you had the pro-life center being told to have this referral in essence. In our case, it was the government forcing to speech. Here it's, the customer of the cake shop saying you have to make this cake. And, our client didn't want to post that notice and said that they would rather close down because it does violate what they believe, and they would never want to refer a woman for an abortion. Mm-hmm. And so same thing, gay marriage, that's a strong belief that people hold, and it's a sincerely held belief. It's in biblical, and so it's not something that they made up or, they just want to be hateful. So it's very similar, and I'm so thankful for that decision. I think it was a narrow decision, but hopefully we'll see more cases like that where our freedom to not engage in things that violate our conscience is protected.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Colorado, for instance, has continued to pursue this baker even after the Supreme Court has ruled, which is supposed to be the end of the line for the appellate system in the judiciary. But nevertheless, these people are so determined to force people to do things that violate their conscience that they are still pursuing these people with fines and investigations, and they're trying to find other people. By the way, I don't use the word gay, I use the word homosexual, because I don't believe in using the dictionary of my enemies. I believe in using the biological dictionary, not the dictionary of my enemies. So they manufactured this whole dictionary of preferred words that you must speak. There are N words you can't speak, C words. Every letter of the alphabet has a forbidden word. It's like I'm out of words. I could throw away my dictionary. I can't even use it anymore. This seems like a whole assault on traditional meanings of words.
Yes, and the sad part is that assault is coming from those who preach tolerance who preach acceptance, and they're bullying a cake maker. So there's just, if you speak up against it or you stand up for your rights, then you are called names, you're boycotted, you're just put on a hit list, and I think really that's why a lot of people don't speak up, and I'm grateful that the cake shop did, and it's just sad that
are you experiencing any pushback because of your involvement in this litigation? Are you getting any pushback from that? Are you not invited to the mayor's cocktail party anymore? Don't get a Christmas card from your representative?
Yeah, no, we do get pushback because, like I said, we have our private firm, and we try to keep that separate, but at the same time, it's the same building, and it's a lot of the same lawyers. Yeah. So, and we're very vocal on our website about what we do, and so there are, especially in Southern California, and we've had to take some things down from our website, really, for business reasons, because we wanted to keep a client.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to manage that, and to stand up against it. You really put your career on the line.
Yeah, but if you don't live it, then you don't believe it.
Right. Yeah, and to me, I just would hate to see what happens if nobody speaks up and we let the agenda of the left take over. That terrifies me.
Yeah, well, so obviously you're not going to roll over and capitulate. You're not going to back up. You're going to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the traditional dictionary and your religion and your right. You're going to defend all of that stuff because you're smart and you're bold and you're assertive.
Thank you. And I love to play the identity politics game. I love that I'm a minority, that I'm a female, that I'm relatively young. Yeah. So I don't look like, that what the other side wants to villainize and say, well, it's this white male complex or white male privilege, because I didn't have any of that. And I still am pro-life, and I'm conservative, and I'm pro-free speech. And so it's nice to play, you don't want to use their dictionary words, but I love using their words and putting it against them. Right. Playing identity politics, and even one of our cases right now is advocating for Church United and a former homosexual. And so for me, I use language like that's his preferred identity is a former homosexual, and so to use their vocabulary to help them understand that this is what's happening, especially when we're litigating in California, and to use things like identity and, and really make my arguments using their language.
You know what my distinction is between, I used to teach this in my classroom, to show students how euphemisms work. Euphemisms, in case people forgot from their high school English class, euphemism is when you put a nice sounding spin on something that otherwise is not so nice.
Yes.
That's a euphemism.
An artist at that.
Yeah, well, you're a lawyer, so obviously you have to be. But my distinction, I actually gave my students a syllogism in logic to prove that not all homosexuals are gay. And I did it with definitions. I defined gay as a homosexual that politicizes their sexuality. And not all homosexuals do politicize their sexuality. Right. So therefore, QED, not all homosexuals are gay. And the students went crazy. They went like, what? How? Because they just swallow the dictionary of the far left professor's classroom. They just left. They get into my classroom and they lose their mind. Their minds explode.
Right, and we're seeing a lot of former homosexuals and current homosexuals come out and be more conservative. There's Brandon Straka with his movement.
I follow him on too.
Clearly shows that they don't want to politicize their sexual orientation.
No.
What does my sexual orientation have to do with what I have to say?
No.
Really? No. And so just to see that movement and the ground that they made in the last election, especially, and their support for our president has been amazing.
Especially among Gen Z. Alex Madagian, who actually introduced us, you and me, and brought you onto the show. He's our vice president for talent, by the way. Thank you, Alex. Go to law school, Alex. He's at George Mason University now, by the way. And I hope he studies law. But the left seems to control the agenda of teaching our students the dictionaries, the proper politically correct dictionaries. And one of the things that's happening here locally is there's a pushback by citizens who are now becoming aware of the fact that sex education, they're teaching children how to be homosexual, how to be transsexual, how to identify, 5-year-old children. Imagine.
Right. 4-year-olds.
Yeah, 4-year-olds, and we have this sex education mandate here in California, as you know. Now, are you going to be going into those cases? Is that on your shopping list of cases to get involved in?
So I don't want to, but yes, I'm going to, because I think I have to, and because I think of my daughter learning that.
Yeah.
But really, I hate it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But someone has to fight, and especially, in the I like to frame things in the constitutional law and more of a legal perspective, and so parental rights are something that's important to me as well. We haven't touched on that yet, but
yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
The right to control the upbringing of their children, and that what the schools are doing now is really infringing upon that.
Yeah, we got about 18 minutes, 18 minutes left on the show. I'd like to really drill down into that, because that's something that's of concern to me and to you and to a lot of our audience out there. What is your legal basis and your moral basis for the fact that as you believe and as I believe, that parents have the unfettered right to protect their children from teachers, public officials, bureaucrats, from being taught things that are violating the conscience of the parent? What's your basis for that? What's the basis for that?
My basis, unfortunately, it's hard to take a strong legal stand based on case law, because case law has been so eroded, especially with the Ninth Circuit, just really stating that parents give up rights when their kids go to public education. And so it's really hard, and that's why we don't have a current lawsuit right now taking on this issue.
Is that what the law is now, Nada? Is the law now in California that if I send my child to a government school, I no longer call them public schools, by the way, I call them government schools, okay? Because that reinforces they're supported by tax dollars. So I don't use the word public anymore, right? So is it the case now that the law is that if I send my child to a government school, then therefore I give up the right to nurture the morality and the consciousness of my own child? Are you kidding?
Yes, unfortunately, that is the law, and the Ninth Circuit said those words almost exactly, and it was in the context of sex education. So it's really, what it's doing is creating, not giving parents the option to send their kids to public school. I really wanted to send my daughter to public school, and I planned on doing it, and it's the most convenient, and I'm paying for public school. I'm funding it. But what's happening is you can't do it unless you want to give up that right. Because even the rights to opt out, you can opt out legally of sex ed class which is taught in middle school and high school usually. But what they've done is they've woven in homosexuality and gender identity into literature, into assemblies, into history, where now by the FAIR Act it's been mandated that we teach the contributions of homosexuals to young children. And we can teach their contributions, but why do we have to talk about their sex and who they had sex with? Even like Gavin Newsom is in a textbook saying Gavin Newsom married men who wanted to have sex with. Just the way that it's even worded is ridiculous. And so there's no way to get out of it. There's no way for parents to have advance notice or have the right to opt out unless you have a school district that chooses to do that, but school districts aren't choosing to do that.
Well, how about homeschooling? Isn't homeschooling, here in this area, Alex Madagian, our mutual friend, he was homeschooled up until the time he went to Silly College. So it's a religious-based homeschool, by the way. My
husband was homeschooled up until college. He's now a mechanical engineer, thriving. So homeschool is really our only option. Homeschool, and if you can find a good private school. Otherwise, there's not a lot that you can do unless your school district passes policies, which they can. And I think, the people who are uprising and being vocal about this, the parents, that's what needs to happen. We need to be so loud that the local school boards want to pass policies to respect parental rights. Because even though there's the case law, local districts have local control, but they're choosing not to exercise that because they're afraid of the ACLU and some of these other liberal organizations that will come in and bully them into submission. But we want to be the counter to that, and we want to we offer free legal defense for school boards that pass parental rights policies. We have a model policy that school boards can pass. We advise free of no cost all over the state. But we haven't seen one school district that's willing to take this on. Even conservative districts with Christian board members, they don't want to be forerunners. They want to fly under the radar and just be able to do their job and not cause any waves. But I mean, it's really sad because that makes parents have to homeschool or private school.
Well, speaking of school boards, here in Santa Bumpkin, I call it Santa Bumpkin because it's really it's a citadel of Bolshevism. There's no other way to call it. I mean, we're not as bad as San Francisco, but we're trying real hard. We'll have poop maps around Santa Barbara pretty soon where you can find human poop. That's coming. Because the homelessness situation is getting much worse here in Santa Barbara. Now, on school boards, there is a group of people that are pushing back and are actually running on the platform of opposing this type of infringement of the parent's conscience with respect to raising the morality of the child through the curriculum. I think that's how I would like to put it.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, and we have several school board candidates that are running here in our locale. And the school board here is very, very far left, very far left. They have even given a contract to a group, maybe you know these people, called Just Community Central Coast. I don't know if you've heard of these people or not.
No, I haven't.
It's an indoctrination scheme hired by the school board, hired by Santa Bumpkin Silly College that I've just retired from. They actually run indoctrination programs for faculty, students, and administrators and the general public to demonstrate how white people are responsible for all of the evils on the planet and even in the universe. White people are responsible for racism, sexism, homophobia, and then they go through all the list. And they even have a chart which was printed on the front page of the Santa Barbara News Press. They even have a chart of discriminated against groups, and of course those are all the minorities. And the target group that they want to dismantle. They want to dismantle. I love the use of this word. They want to dismantle white, heterosexual, Christian, homeschooled Trump supporters. Now, what does dismantle mean? Take me apart? Am I like a toy? I can be dismantled? Take my arm off of my head?
That. I'm really sure that they would like that because it's becoming more and more violent on that end. So they're using the strong language intentionally.
Well, you heard the I think she's a CNN correspondent or a commentator, I forget her name, but she went into a rant on air talking about we have to obliterate and wipe out the Republican Party and the survivors. And because she said on camera, if there's any survivors, they'll try to do it again. Perish the thought. Okay,
yeah,
we're coming down.
There's no room for healthy public discourse.
No,
it used to be that you can have differing opinions and you can engage and not take it personally or attack the other person. But yet they're attacking, especially white men. And my husband's a white man, and my boss is a white man. So it's just so sad and heartbreaking to see how they pick on a particular group and how they're discriminating against that group and putting these labels on them without knowing a single thing about who they are. And that's racism to me, to say that we need to take down the white man. I've never heard more clear racism in my life. I've never seen it except when I hear the antagonism toward white men. And even through 9/11 and being in a Muslim family and being Middle Eastern and being Palestinian as well, I've never heard that type of racism ever. And it's madness to think that that's okay right now, and that the anchors can talk about it freely on TV. It's really sad.
Well, I think the problem is in education. We have lost control of our schools, our government schools especially, many private schools. For instance, I believe there's no longer a Catholic university in America, even though I'm a graduate of the Catholic University in Washington, D.C. They routinely hire atheists to teach theology. and thinking, oh, well, if you're strong enough in your faith, you won't mind an atheist teaching theology.
And they really are trying to dismantle, especially in California, what they say to universities and the laws that they're trying to pass to have abortion pills available on every campus, to take away funding to schools who don't allow homosexuals to live on campus or to go to their schools. I mean, it's really intentional. And it's incremental, so that they, it's just under the radar, small steps to, and I can see the left in California pushing the sexual agenda onto homeschools and private schools. Thankfully, right now, that's not the case. But first they did with the public schools, and then they went after charter schools, because a lot of people use charter schools as an alternative, especially if you can't afford to homeschool or to private school. And so they passed that law. And the next step really is going to be to go after homeschoolers, and so we need to be vigilant. And I've seen homeschool moms storm the state capitol and be effective, but it's a matter of keeping up that energy and keeping up that passion and being aware of what's going on.
Okay, so we've got about 8 more minutes left on our program, and I want to thank you for sticking with us for so long. It's a long interview, but what can be done? Now, suppose I find myself in a situation as a parent or not, and I believe that my children or other children are being abused, sexually abused, by forcing them to listen to sexual discussions at an early age of 4 years old. What do I do? What? I mean, you and I, we're out there, we're on TV, we're in the courts. We're using the law and we're using the media to amplify our point of view. But what can a citizen do? A person who's just wanting a good life and a peaceful life. What can they do?
They can not subject their children to public school, but are you saying that that's where it would happen, or they just see it in general?
Well, I've actually started a petition to defund all government schools. Just deny them.
Yeah.
And I'm ripping a line from Julius Caesar. He said, if you want to stop a superior, larger force of barbarians, he says, in his Gallic Wars, he said, attack their baggage train. Deny them the ability to wage war.
The money. You go after the money.
Right.
And that's how the ACLU does it too. They threaten to get the schools defunded if they don't go along with the agenda. But going back to your question, because it is important, because moms, especially moms, and moms and dads as leaders of their household, but they need to channel their mama bear and their parental instincts. And whether it's getting the word out and saying what happened, speaking up. Even, I'm generally naturally very quiet, and I don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't want to argue. I just want to be peaceful. Oh,
you love to argue. You love to argue. Come on.
No, but we have to. So even the quiet Christian moms and homeschool moms, when they see something, we need to be vocal about it, and we need to put aside our preference to be quiet and to really spread the word. And also, if it's in school, go to school board meetings, because those are elected officials that are accountable to you, and that's who you vote for. So those are 2 small steps that you can do. Be vocal, go to your school board meeting.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. It was on my lips, but I'm glad that it came from yours, because you are much more of an authority figure on these things than I am. People are beginning to go to school board meetings and meetings of the Board of Trustees. You may be interested in our local Santa Barbara City College, formerly known as Santa Barbara City College, now known as Santa Bumpkin Silly College. They have just passed a internal Board of Trustees proviso, a rule to restrict the public comment, which is protected by the Brown Act. Are you ready for this?
Wow.
Yeah, wow. That just happened. One of our newly elected trustees, who's a very far left individual, she said, well, we should sort of do something about the public comment. Too many people were coming to the board and wasting the time of the board by actually speaking up in opposition to the board policy. This is the same board that tried to cancel the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, but one brave female former English professor, Celeste Barber, she made them back down, all by her lonesome. Powerful, powerful. But are you aware of the fact that they're trying to, at these public meetings of the boards, since more and more people are attending, they're trying to restrict the amount of time that you have? Very clever. First it was 5 minutes, they're going to cut it to 3 minutes, and then you have to speak on an item that's on the agenda. I think that's a violation of the Brown Act myself. But.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't aware that that was happening. The board meetings that we've attended, both in Riverside County and Orange County, we make sure that they do give that right, and thankfully we're a little bit more conservative, I think, than Santa Barbara, but really... Yeah, so the problem with filing a lawsuit, though, because that's a lot what you have to do to get some of these people to comply and to understand they're violating the law.
Right.
You have to have a plaintiff who's been injured, and there's so many technical requirements, but we can. So if you and your viewers can keep an eye out for someone who would be willing to sue and who personally had that right infringed and suffered harm for it, I think that would be a great avenue,
and
because that's where these battles are won, is in the courtroom.
Right, and in preparation for that, in the event that should happen, what we have learned, I certainly have learned, and many people have learned, videotape and audio tape every meeting that you attend, especially if you are speaking. Do that, document, make a paper trail of every email, every Facebook comment, every social media posting that is against you or against your views. Document that, so that when you hire her, or you would not even hire her because you're doing it pro bono, when you bring your case to Nada and her firm, or other firms, there are many other firms that do exactly the type of work you do. You'll have a case. But you just can't stand up in front of a judge and say, "Oh, they discriminated against me for free speech." Well, where's your proof? "Oh, I don't have any proof. I don't have." Get out of my courtroom,
Yeah, we get a lot of that. We get a lot of people that just want to sue because they think something is wrong, or even, and I understand you want to sue because there's pornographic sex ed material, but we can't do that because the law is not on it. The law is what's mandating this, so we really have to have a plaintiff that's been harmed, even if it's a, sexual harassment case or emotional distress by a child who's been subjected to this, but, we need all of those factors to have the right case. And
so speak a little bit about the fact that most people are under the false impression that you need to give an attorney a lot of money in order to file a lawsuit. Can you please correct that false notion?
Yeah, so I don't accept a dime from our clients that we represent. They don't pay for the cost, they don't pay for anything, and a lot of times the other side will have to pay us attorney's fees if we win. And so, like the Reproductive Fact Act, the state of California had to pay us thousands of dollars, and that covered our attorney's fees. And even if they didn't, that's why we have our for-profit side, is because our for-profit side is where we make our money, but our nonprofit side can thrive because God has blessed the for-profit side.
You know what? We're actually wrapping the show. I want to thank you for being our special guest, and folks, if you ever get into these situations, call Nada and her law firm.
Call me.
Yeah, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you later on Freedom Matters.
God bless. Thank you.
God bless. Bye-bye.